questions. Um, and later on, just before we leave, I'm going to make sure that I drop the ability to find more information about the law school schedule tours in my email in the chat. And I'm happy to follow up with anyone on particular questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dean Richards. And I'll go ahead and pass the mic to Dean Johnson from Southwest Law.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Nydia Johnson, and I'm the Associate Dean for Academic Success and DEI Initiatives and an Associate Professor of Law at Southwestern Law School in Los Angeles, California. I'm also a proud alum of the law school. Southwestern Law School is located about 2 miles from downtown Los Angeles. If you're a little bit more familiar with the area, it's in Koreatown. It's a very heavily populated city area, but there's really close access to the metro and other public transportation there on Wilshire Boulevard. Southwestern offers various JD programs, which include a full-time JD on-campus program. It's a 3-year program. We also offer one of the first and most long-standing 2-year accelerated programs. It's called Scale. We currently offer a part-time day and a evening program, but we will be sunsetting our evening program with the launch of our new and fully asynchronous JD online program. So that was just announced a couple of weeks ago. We'll be the first law school in the nation to have a fully asynchronous online JD program, and we're very excited about that. It is really just another step in a long tradition Southwestern has had towards making illegal education more accessible. And so we're excited about that. As we've kind of talked about in earlier panels, we really don't care what law school you go to. We're just really passionate about seeing you and your voice in this profession. And so we hope that we can answer some of the questions you might have about how to navigate the application process.
Thank you so much, Dean Johnson. And last but not least, I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic to Dean Winograd from Loyola Law.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Patty Winograd. I am the Associate Dean for Equity and Inclusion and an Associate Clinical Professor at Loyola Law School. I am excited to be able to speak to you all about what Loyola offers. We are a kind of a neighbor of sorts to Southwestern Law School. We are prominently located downtown in close proximity to federal and state courts. And we believe our location also allows us to do some community work through our clinics. We have over 20 live clinics that include things like the Immigration Law Project, a clinic that works on getting folks who have been unfairly incarcerated out, and the Juvenile Law and Policy Clinic. So many opportunities that really come out of being in the place that we are, that we think makes us an exciting law school. Also, we do offer a full-time JD day program. In addition to that, we offer a JD hybrid program that allows students to work alongside really attending law school at night. The JD hybrid program affords a student an opportunity to come to campus only once in a week, with the rest of the study being asynchronous. And I look forward to answering other more specific questions about the law school this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Dean Winograd. So we're going to go ahead and get into some basic law school questions. And then, like I said, once we get through those, I'll go ahead and open up the mic to go ahead and let people ask questions one at a time. What I ask is that you raise your hand, and I'll go ahead and go through the queue. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm actually going to ask Dean Winograd to answer this question, but how difficult is it to get into law school?
Well, I'll give a lawyerly answer, which is difficult but attainable. I know for all of you here, as Dean Richards mentioned at the outset, for those of you, right, really interested in pursuing the law, I'm sure that your backgrounds and everything that you've done to date and the adversity that you may have, confronted really make you poised to, get into the struggles of law school. But what does it take to get in? It takes, really an academic record that essentially shows that you have the interest, the ability, and some of the foundational skills that will allow you to succeed in a place like law school. Also, the two key metrics that tend to be emphasized for law school are undergraduate GPA combined with the LSAT score. And so, needless to say, those two things, even individually and certainly together, are both, things that can reflect well on your candidacy for law school. I think we collectively here believe that the LSAT, making it a focus, spending time on putting your best foot forward to be able to succeed on the LSAT, all of those things are critical as you think about the steps you want to take to prepare for law school. But I guess I would also say that especially in the climate that we're in today, I feel strongly that we are looking to diversify the legal profession. I think that most of us are interested in seeing a variety of candidates and interested in seeing kind of the whole person that you bring. So while you will hear over and over again in this process that there are kind of these two important factors, I want you all to know that really your whole life, right? Your whole history, the things that you have experienced and the reasons that you may be driven to, seek a legal education for good, right? Makes you great candidates. So please think about yourselves as, folks that do have more in the stable than just those two metrics. We want to hear about it. We want to talk to you. And though it is difficult, I think now is a fantastic time in legal education to be pursuing a law degree. And we want to hear your stories.
Thank you so much, Dean Winograd. So I'm going to move on to my next question. So my next question for Dean Richards is going to be, what is accreditation for law school and is it important?
Yeah, thank you so much, Tristan. So accreditation really looks at who is the sort of governing body that monitors how law schools can award their degrees. And there are typically, at least in California, two bodies that you think about. One is the American Bar Association, which is a national body, and even perhaps international, and the California State Bars. So schools that are accredited under the ABA, the biggest thing to know is that typically means that you can take the bar exam in any state or jurisdiction, not leaving out District of Columbia, and that they will typically recognize your law school degree during that process when you're applying for licensure in those jurisdictions. When you attend a school that is either accredited by the California State Bar or not accredited but regulated by the California State Bar, that means then that you typically cannot be licensed in another jurisdiction. So if you choose to leave California, you sort of have to know what that means. The implication then of that is that you want to think a lot about the schools that you're applying to and what that means for your future decisions. If you are very sure, one, about where you're going to live, that you're only going to be in the state of California, then you might choose to attend a California state accredited school, and that might be fine for you geographically. If, however, there's any flirting in your mind that someday in your future, and as my grandparents like to say, life is long, just keep living. So if there's any thought that someday in that future, you may move outside the state and your law degree is something that you might want to use in active practice, then that's something you should really carefully consider about whether or not other jurisdictions will accept a degree from a non-California accredited institution. The other implication is the type of work that you might want to do. So if you think that at all, you might want to work in a larger law firm or in-house or general counsel, perhaps even, and I'm going to say this sort of treading lightly, but even some government positions, right? Maybe the Department of Justice or Attorney General's office or something like that. It may be a factor whether or not you attended an ABA accredited school. I'm a lawyer, so I have to say it depends, but I would weigh that as a serious factor. And also just keep in mind if the type of work that Lynette was speaking about earlier, and I know she's a proud Southwestern grad as well, is appealing to you, keep in mind that she said she went to school in California. She started with the company in California, but right now she's based out of Colorado, which I would suspect means that they want her to at least have the ability to practice law there, which means being from an ABA accredited school. So it's not necessarily better or worse, but it is just important to think about the implications of all of those choices.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dean Richards. And then if we can go ahead and move on to, I'm sure, the infamous question, which is how much does law school cost? And as the panelists had mentioned, law school, of course, is an investment. There are many different fields you can work in once you have your JD. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Dean Johnson to just go ahead and chime in here.
Sure. So, I think what can be the daunting part about being interested in pursuing a law school in a JD degree is, of course, the cost, right? At Southwestern Law School, currently full-time tuition is around $58,000 and part-time is around $38,000. And I think all of the schools represented here, we're pretty much in the same ballpark in terms of tuition. What you'll find as well is for even some of the state schools like UCLA Law School, for example, they're in the same ballpark as well, which is a bit different from what you might have known in undergrad, right? Which was you'll go to a state school. There'll be some cost savings. For example, I went to USC for undergrad. Had I gone to a state school, I would have had some savings. But now in law school, even though Southwestern is a private standalone law school and UCLA is part of a state school, the costs are still pretty similar for the legal education. So with that said, it's important to consider. And I think the good news is that for all of you that are here, whatever part of the journey you're in, perhaps there's still space to make some really strategic planning to how you might be able to be more eligible or attractive for scholarship opportunities. So most scholarship distributions that are given for law school are based upon entering credentials. And when I use the term entering credentials, I'm referring to your LSAT score as well as your undergraduate GPA being the two most important factors that are considered. So if you're trying to figure out like, well, what am I aiming for? What do I need so that I can be scholarship eligible or scholarship attractive? I would encourage you to take a look at the admissions profiles of the law schools that you're interested in. Most schools will publish a class profile on their website. If you're considering an ABA accredited law school, they're also required to include some of this information in what's called a 509 report. but you'll be able to glean from that what the median LSAT score was, which was what was the average score of the students that were admitted, as well as what was the average undergraduate GPA of the students that were admitted. There's another data point that I want you to take a look at, which is the 75th percentile. So that 75th percentile is generally pretty indicative of the folks who got scholarship money, right? Because it's the upper 25th percentile of the class that was admitted. So the closer that you are to those figures, that LSAT score, that undergraduate GPA, you can kind of begin to gauge perhaps like what your eligibility might be for scholarship consideration. I would even argue if you're like around, the average, certainly ask the questions, ask, is there anything that I could do to be considered for scholarship funding? Are there like optional essay opportunities? Are there other things? Is there a scholarship? For example, Southwestern has scholarship interviews actually that we will do for students that are in that band that we're considering for scholarship. So very important. And I want to encourage you to really invest the time in the LSAT preparation. That's probably one of the most important factors that schools will consider. So whether that's a free program, whether that's a commercial program, it's just the kind of exam that you don't want to show up the day of and that be the first, time you've taken the car for a test drive, right? You want to have practiced, conditioned, so that you can really make yourself as attractive as an applicant as possible to try to reduce this cost. There's also some programs, if you're interested in public interest law, really important for you to know about like the public interest loan forgiveness program. Certain careers are eligible. So if you work at a nonprofit, for example, if you work at the DA's office, the PD's office, if you work at a school, certain careers, if you do 10 years and you're in an income-based repayment plan, after making your consecutive payments for 10 years, you will receive a loan forgiveness for the balance. So that is also a really important thing to note for those that have an interest in public interest law and you're wondering, how in the heck do I help people and effectuate change on this salary and with these loans? Thankfully, there is a path for folks like us to do that. So
thank you so much, Dean Johnson. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our next question. And I'm sure this is probably a very common question that prospective law students want to ask, which is how long does law school take, as in the process to apply to law school, and when should they apply? Sorry about that. Let me go ahead and ask Dean Winograd to chime in on that question.
So I think you asked a couple of questions. So first of all, how long does law school take? The process of law school, of course, I think you heard from Dean Richards that they have a couple of accelerated programs. Generally speaking, you're looking at a traditional program of 3 years. That said, there are some programs that offer variations on that. And I think both at Southwestern and Loyola, our evening programs, styled a little differently now, afford a JD even after 4, sometimes 5 years. So let's say you're looking about the range of, on average, right, 3 years, but on either side, there may be some opportunities to take less time or more time. With respect to process and how to apply and how long that process applies. So as I think I alluded to earlier, right, the process of law school and everything that you do, right, that actually is considered in your portfolio, right, has something to do with what drove your decision to start applying to law school. In terms of the more granular process, right, how long does it take to prepare for the test, to start accumulating the letters of recommendation, right, to start preparing really that story, your story that is encapsulated in a personal statement, which law schools are looking for to introduce who you are, why you are, what is motivating you to take this step. I mean, obviously, you know, back to our lawyerly answer, depends. I mean, that is really up to you. I think we all would agree that what you're trying to do is really give us as law schools a picture of you that really is a genuine and authentic reflection of who you are and what is motivating this decision, and giving us a little bit of a flavor of, you know, how we know you're going to succeed, right? So that process can take anywhere, you know, from, you know, it could take 6 months, it could take a shorter time. It really just depends on you and how where you are, what stage in your career trajectory, school trajectory you happen to be. So there's no one right answer. But as to kind of initiating the process, we all now have, I think it's fair to say, applications that are active on our websites. And I think each of us has, I'll let Deans Johnson and Richard speak for their process, but we have at Loyola some early decision options where, to the extent that you get your application in before the December timeframe, you may have a better chance of obtaining admission. And the process that we go through typically takes around 8 to 10 weeks on a somewhat of a rolling basis. So I know that's a lot of information, but I think I answered your questions, Tristan.
Yes, thank you so much, Dean Winograd. And then we'll go ahead and let the prospective law students now ask some questions. So you're more than welcome to go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll go by the queue, and we can have you unmute and ask your questions. You can also type your question in the chat if that's easier as well, and I can go ahead and ask it to our speakers.
I have a question that someone might want to know an answer to. So like generally, how long should students study for the LSAT if they want to be in that really competitive range, or what could they do to prepare?
I'll start by saying that there's a couple of things here, right? So what can you do to prepare? I really encourage everyone that a good starting place is LSAC. They have now both Khan Academy, which is a free LSAT preparatory course that I think many of us would feel comfortable telling people is a good place to start your preparation. And then they've also rolled out something called Law Hub, which has many practice tests. I would be hesitant to tell anyone to pay for any resource that does not include multiple practice tests and feedback opportunities, because from everything I've learned, the single most important thing for the LSAT or the bar exam, which you would do, several years afterwards, is your practice experience, getting comfortable, feeling ready going in. So start with Khan Academy, start with Law Hub, and then determine from there, based on your own learning style, do you need to pay for a class? Do you need a private tutor? Do you need to just find more books that you can self-study from? Where are you situated when you do some practice tests? Are you within the range that you want to be? Are you really far away from it? Because that might tell you, hey, I need to pay for a tutor because I really am aiming for this number and I'm 15 points away and something, you know, dramatic has to happen. But first gen to probably first gen, start with the free stuff, you know, and if you're doing that and sort of taking your time, then you probably need to give yourself at least 2 or so months. Some people study for 6+ months, and a lot of that depends on people's life schedules. But I would say, you know, confidently, a couple of months, the opportunity to do many, many tests and get yourself familiar is probably what's going to set you best up for success.
Thank you, Dean Richards.
Thank you, Dean Richards. And I was able to just go ahead and look up those programs that Dean Richards mentioned. I pasted those links in the chat. So you're more than welcome to take a picture of the chat or a screenshot of that on your computer as well. So I see we have a question in the chat, which is, what LSAT range are you all looking for? And then I'll go ahead and actually pass the mic to this one on to Dean Johnson, because I know you're mentioning the 75th percentile. I think that'd be perfect to mention.
Yeah, so I'll speak for Southwestern. Every school that you consider will have a different range and band. And I think most admissions offices would tell you this is just part of the review process, right? It really is more holistic. So it's going to be the LSAT coupled with your undergraduate GPA, along with your personal statement and letters of recommendation. So it really is intended to be a holistic review. But in terms of the LSAT, at Southwestern, our median LSAT score, which is like the average for this last entering class, was a 155, and our 75th percentile was a 158, and our 25th percentile was a 152. So that just kind of gives you an idea. Those are bands, right? They're just kind of within those percentiles. So as you're thinking about schools that you might be interested in, take a look at those admissions profiles so that you kind of know as you're starting with your LSAT prep. You know, many years ago when I did my LSAT prep course, you kind of started with a just very baseline assessment to just see, you know, where do you fare at the beginning, just your natural inclination of how you would perform on the test, so that you would take a baseline test so you can kind of see, and then it's fun to see the growth. I was one of those applicants who had a lot of growth from my baseline assessment to where I ended up on the LSAT. And I will say, as much as, you know, there's things about the LSAT exam that we think could be better or that could be changed, one of the things that I think is important is that there's no magic plan that someone can give you that will substitute the practice and the work that you have to put in. So the most important thing that you can do for preparing for the LSAT is really to sit and do practice. I tell my students all the time, butt in the chair, sit down, practice, like actually simulated exams, working it through, timing yourself. Stamina is such a big part of this. And this will continue. It goes on in law school, and it will continue for the bar exam. And so that is one common thread about the LSAT to law school to the bar exam, is that you really have to put in the muscle and do the practice. So yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Thank you so much, Dean Johnson. And I see that some people may have just joined the breakout room. So we are answering questions right now from anybody who can go ahead and type it in the chat or raise their hand to our speakers. Okay, well, I'm actually going to go ahead and ask a question we were asked earlier, because I think maybe some of us are a little bit shy right now. They do want to go ahead and ask this question, which is, we know that some law schools accept a GRE score, but how important is it to take the LSAT, especially in light of scholarships, financial aid, things like that? And if Dean Richards, if you don't mind going ahead and answering this question, really appreciate it.
Sure. So yes, and to those who don't know, the GRE is another standardized test that you may take for admissions to other graduate school programs. And so some law schools, recognizing that for some people, paying and taking for multiple exams might be prohibited, right, or difficult, or they may just perform better on the GRE, accept accept that as well. I don't remember, I apologize to my colleagues if Southwestern and Loyola accept the GRE for admissions. We do at Pepperdine. That said, I feel like it's important to say that even if they do and we do, the standard in the legal academy and law schools is the LSAT, which means that most of those judgments about scholarship, applications and awards are made based on the LSAT. So if you are saying, I'm going to take the GRE for whatever reason that may be, my encouragement would be, one, to check very carefully if the school or schools you're interested in accept it, because I would hate for you to go all the way down that road and find out the school does not accept those scores. So one, find out if they accept it. And two, I would follow up with that admissions or financial aid department and ask them quite candidly how weighted the GRE is when it comes to scholarship awards. I will say, for us, we at Pepperdine, while we accept the GRE and we do review it for scholarship awards, I tell students, prospective students all the time, to have your most competitive scholarship, I really encourage you to do the LSAT, because it is much easier for us to make that approximation than to try to figure out what that GRE says. So, it's kind of a both and. Where you can, take the LSAT. It's a good investment for the financials that you want.
Thank you so much, Dean Richards, for that thorough answer. And we have about 3 more minutes left before we're going to get kicked back to the main room with the 2-minute warning. So I will take another question. You guys can raise your hand or type it in the chat if you're feeling a little bit shy. But we'll go ahead and take another question from our speakers. Okay, well, I will go ahead and ask another question. I saw that somebody had put in the chat that they really appreciate the diversity on the panel. So Dean Richards, I wanted to ask you, how did you end up going to law school? What made you decide you wanted to go?
In the very short version, from being a child, I was intrigued by the idea of being an attorney, which data shows us is actually true for most people who end up in law school. Some type of exposure in childhood or the early preteen, teen years gives them the information. And then I chose to work with a nonprofit after undergraduate. So I took 2 years off. My experience with that nonprofit, working with children and youth in sort of high-risk, disadvantaged experiences, led me to say I wanted to be able to make a change. And to me, the law seemed to be the way that most change could be affected across the world. And so that meant going to law school and being the best I possibly could. And so I'll say to Natalie, because I just saw that in the chat, I took 2 years off, and I don't know, many others might have done that as well. So, but because it was in a couple of years, and hopefully you've made good relationships with your undergraduate professors, I just went back to one of my favorite professors and asked her for a recommendation, and she was willing to give it. And so, maintain those relationships, reach out to those people, let them know this is what you're considering, and see if they'd be willing to do that. You might also seek recommendations from people who have supervised you at work. To the extent you get those sorts of professional recommendations, I feel comfortable saying on behalf of almost any law school, ask them to really make the connection between that professional experience and your academic capabilities. Because what we want to know is that you're going to be academically strong. So I don't just want them to say you were super nice at work or you had a strong work ethic, but why does that mean that you are going to perform well in law school? But we'll accept those, absolutely. If you did a graduate program, get it from your graduate supervisor, but people who can speak to what you're going to contribute to our law school environment and how you are going to be academically successful.
Thank you so much, Dean Richards. I appreciate you answering the question in the chat. I will also say too that if you all were able to listen to the panelists earlier, they talked a lot as well about internships and community based organization work. All of that also helps build recommendation letters, right? And then also, you know, if you're an undergraduate student right now, going to office hours, going above and beyond to build a relationship with your professor is really, really important to have a strong recommendation letter as well, as Dean Richards had mentioned. So we're actually at time right now. They're gonna kick us off in about a minute. So this is our last breakout room. So I do want to give a very, very warm thank you to Dean Winograd, Dean Johnson, and Dean Richards for all their time today. Now you guys have answered the same questions a couple of times now. So I do want to thank you for, again, your time on Saturday morning and for helping our prospective law students. And you know, we hope to see more lawyers in the future here at LA Civil Rights. And as Dean Richards mentioned, our general manager is a lawyer, so that just tells you that you can really do anything with a career in law. So thank you so much to everybody for being here, and we'll be back to the main room in just a second.